Hello and welcome back to the Dive Line. It's Jim and Craig again. I'm Jim, and over in his studio in the other side of Norfolk is Craig. Hello, Craig.
Good morning. How are you, Jim?
I'm very well, thank you, Craig. We've got a really great episode coming up. It's episode 5, so we're rattling through them. We've got Rich Somerset, Territory Director from PADI. He's talking to us with a really great message. And we've got Matt Ireland, who's sitting in the wings somewhere at the moment. Hello, Matt.
Morning, Jim. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Matt. Nice to see you.
And you, always a pleasure.
Yeah, indeed. So you're going to be talking to Craig in a little while about BDMLR.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, so that's the British Divers Marine Life Rescue.
Certainly is. Yep, volunteers for life.
Brilliant stuff. So just touching on the previous episode, which was episode 4 with Mark Evans from Scuba Diver magazine. Really great insights from him as to what the industry are thinking about diving in the UK and staycations and helping out local dive centres. So that was really good. Just wanted to thank everybody for downloading, subscribing, sharing and liking everything that we do. We really appreciate it. It helps support us and support what we're doing and helps us get some incredible guests. So please keep doing that. And thank you very much. So Craig, I'll hand Matt over to you.
Thank you very much, Jim, and let me just echo everything you just said. Thank you so much to everybody that's been downloading and sharing. So just briefly, we're going to talk about British Divers Marine Life Rescue. This is a UK-based charity that's really close to my heart. And as Jim has already introduced, we have with us today Matt Ireland, who is a good friend, a dive buddy, but also, like me, a Marine Mammal Medic with the British Divers Marine Life Rescue. So welcome, Matt. Before we hand over to you, I'm just going to give our listeners a little bit of history about the BDMLR and who they are. So it was formed in 1998 by some like-minded divers, actually here in Norfolk, the area in the UK that we're in. And it was as a result of a mass mortality of harbour seals in a coastal area near us called the Wash. And since its formation, the BDMLR has been involved in the rescue of marine wildlife around the whole of the UK. In fact, it is actually the only UK-wide charity that does look after marine wildlife. Seals are a major part of what we do. We have 45% of the world's grey seals on our beaches in the UK. As marine mammal medics, we get called out to rescue those a lot. Matt, let me bring you in there. You and I met when we first did a training course some time back to become marine mammal medics. What brought you into it and what was your motivation?
Well, I first heard about them from another dive friend, I believe, who had a badge on her jumper, and I just sort of said, well, what's that? Got told about it and was told there's an upcoming course, and I thought, well, this sounds pretty good. Being like every other diver, you know, I'm very keen on wildlife, and I thought this could be a great way to, you know, to help them out if possible. So I signed up for the course. I went off up to, was it Wales Next to Sea, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what you meant.
I live in Suffolk, so it's a good hour and a half trek for me up there, but it was a fantastic, very interesting day, and just very enjoyable as well. And once we were qualified, off we went. The first time I actually received a text, I was at work, so I was up in Yorkshire, so I couldn't do anything about it. But eventually, when my first sort of shout as such came through that I could go to, well, I was pretty excited to say the least. Nervous, terrified, but excited to be actually able to go and help. So away we went. But to me, it's just a great charity, really worth supporting and helping. And it's just, I find it really, really rewarding. Even just the comments from members of the public when they see you actually out trying to help, it just makes it so worthwhile.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's some peaks and troughs on how busy we are depending on when the pupping season is. So we've got the common seals that are sort of summer, June, July, August. And then in the winter, November, December, January, we get the grey seals. And as they're pupping, that's when we get the calls out from the public and they see a seal in distress. Jim?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so I mean, I've seen what you guys do, and it's amazing, and you must feel really proud of what you do. To be able to do that must be great. But I'm just wondering how you can do it now. Obviously, you've got the social distancing and everything going on. How do you get out and rescue these animals now?
So it's been a lot quieter recently, obviously because people can't just go and freely out on the beach as such. I myself haven't actually received a text in the Suffolk area of anything being reported as yet, but we can go, because we carry identification cards, as long as we're carrying them, we can go, and all we can do at the moment is visually inspect and assess them. We can't actually pick them up because at the moment we can't take them anywhere because everywhere's either full or closed. We can just purely observe and check on their welfare, and we can always mark them. And then, you know, if we go back out to it, we know it's already one that's been assessed.
So are you getting less reports because there's less people around then?
Absolutely, yeah. Like I say, I've not had. I know we're kind of in between the seasons, as Craig was just saying, but it has gone awfully quiet because it's not just seals we deal with, porpoises, and you know, any marine life essentially. But there's been nothing.
No. Well, so there's probably animals in distress. You just haven't had the reports.
Quite possibly. And unfortunately, we can't go and check because, I mean, I can't. It's a bit too far for me to walk to the beach to go and have a look. And the chance, you know, it's like a needle in a haystack, isn't it? Going to the beach to hopefully find something that might need help. I mean, I take it as there's no calls, there's nothing in distress. That's the way I see it. Think, you know.
So the process is, as Matt was mentioning, if a report comes in to head office, and we'll put the phone number up for those watching it on YouTube shortly. When a report comes in of a seal in distress, it gets handed to the local coordinator for a particular area, who then sends out a bulk text to all marine mammal medics in that area. That hasn't been happening. What has been happening is that a direct normal text message has gone out to an individual person to ask if they're close enough. We are deemed to be an essential service, so as long as we're carrying our ID cards and we are on the way to check a seal, we are allowed to go and do that. And we have made a special arrangement with the RSPCA that they will do any transportation. We all have vehicles with seal cages in the back. We can pick up the seal under normal circumstances. That element we're not doing. So if we find a seal that needs relocating, I can pick it up, move it up the beach away from dog walkers, for example, where local people are still allowed on the beaches, and relocate that seal away, and that has happened. But if it's injured or unwell and it needs transportation to a wildlife centre, the RSPCA are called in to do that element.
Well, that you've just answered the question that I was going to come up with is, you know, what happened once you've assessed this animal, whatever it may be. Obviously, you can release some and help some back into the water, but the other ones that need a little bit of extra treatment, a little bit of extra care. What is the process? Where do they go? How do you know where to send them? Yeah.
So if you answer the call, essentially you'll go down to the beach, let's say. And you'll keep in contact with head office. What you'll do, your initial assessment, you'll photograph the seal, for argument's sake, and just send some photos off. Then they can also sort of assess whether it will need picking up or not, because they'll be in contact with the closest sort of rehabilitation centre. So if there's not actually going to be space, for argument's sake, you guys in Norfolk have got East Winch up near King's Lynn. In Suffolk, that's kind of also the sort of closest area. So if it needs to be relocated, I could pick it up, and then I would take it to, say, somewhere around the Suffolk-Norfolk border and meet someone like Craig, who would then take the seal on and relay it. But they can also go south, because there's not many, I don't think there's any place in Suffolk really that can take them.
Does it always go local then, or does it go anywhere in the UK? They
have been to like the other side of the UK if need be, if there's purely no space, but they will try and keep them as close as they can, purely for not stressing the animal out, because obviously the longer it's taken to transport it, the more it's going to get stressed. So we don't want to be doing that at any cost really. So the closer we can keep it, the better.
Yeah, and the way that's actually achieved is the Marine Mammal Medic is not expected to drive across the country. another bulk text will go out to link people up as relays. One thing I think it's really important to point out, Matt and I mentioned the dive buddies as well as friends. In fact, Matt and I are in the minority. There aren't many divers that are actually Marine Mammal Medics, and so it's a charity anybody can get involved in, and you know, it can be on inspections, it can be on relays and transport, or just on fundraising.
Absolutely.
I think it's amazing what you guys do, and I mean, it is all volunteer work as well, isn't it? So it's all your own time, and you know, to be able to save just one seal, like Matt says, for example, a seal, it must be hugely rewarding.
I don't know what Craig's first ever experience was like, but the very first time I went to the seal, I was terrified, and it just it took so long to actually get it, and I didn't actually have my crate on me because it was still at my house. So I had to get a friend of mine to go to my house to pick my crate up, to meet me at the beach, and to carry this poor seal all the way back up the beach. I was absolutely exhausted, but actually to manage it, once I'd been out a few times, it became a lot easier. And as Craig said, you don't have to be a diver. My girlfriend's best friend, she's a veterinary nurse, but she's not a diver as yet, but she's an active BDMLR medic as well down in Cornwall. And when we went down there at the end of last year, we went and visited a few of the seals that they've got in rehab to see, you know, how they're doing it, and meet a few of the medics there as well, which is great.
One thing I think we'd like to mention, Jim, to end this on, is just some information for any member of the public that happens to come across a seal that they think might be in distress, or a porpoise or a dolphin stranded or anything like that at all. We are the experts. The British Divers Marine Life Rescue have people covering the whole of the UK coast. We have specialist entanglement teams. You know, if somebody's out on a boat and sees a wow entangled, it could be a porpoise. In Essex recently, we had 2 dolphins stranded on a mud bank that we successfully rescued using the RNLI hovercrafts there to get our guys out onto the mud banks. But if you see anything, don't actually approach it. They look cuddly, particularly seals. They hiss like cats, they bite like dogs. Don't approach them, don't let your dogs approach them. They can carry disease. We wear masks and gloves that everyone's getting used to now in the COVID situation. We don't go down on the beach without that type of gear, because you know, they breathe air, and you don't want to take seal snot in your face. Is not nice, I promise you. But call the experts. You know, and as I say, we'll put up a message on our screens for those watching on YouTube with the call-out numbers for British Divers Marine Life Rescue. And anyone that's listening on podcast, you will of course find a Facebook page. Is the easiest way to get in touch.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good, really interesting. I think that's something we could probably bring up again in a future episode and talk more at length about it, couldn't we?
Yeah, what would be really nice is if Matt, you and I actually managed to get on a rescue together, and one of us could actually go Facebook Live during a seal rescue where the other one's catching a seal and putting it in a crate.
As long as it goes smoothly.
We could see what you actually do then, and see how, you know, what things you face. So yeah, thank you, Matt. That's really good of you to come on. Another thing that we might want to do in the future, obviously we know each other from doing our IDC together and our IE, didn't we? Which was eventful. So it'd be good to get you back to talk about that, because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that are considering doing their IDC. So it'd be great to get you back to talk about that, and we can reminisce.
Absolutely, yeah, that'd be quite a laugh. I'd like to think about how we became dive instructors. That'd be quite a laugh, wouldn't it? So, but yeah, it'd be a pleasure to come back and talk about it. That'd be great. So just before I go, just with regards to the BDMLR, if I can just say a nice big thank you to a company called Go Fetch from South Wales. They transport people's pets all over the world, and they very kindly donated a good dozen or so seal crates to BDMLR. So I just want to say thank you ever so much to Matt, the owner of that. All the crates.
Yeah, well done.
They've all gone to use. So thank you very much, Go Fetch. Really appreciate it. But it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. It's been lovely to actually speak to somebody, with this COVID lockdown. It's made quite a pleasant change. So I've really enjoyed my time on the podcast.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on, Matt. We're really happy to have with us today Rich Somerset of PADI, Territory Director at PADI Europe, Middle East and Africa. Rich, tell us a bit about yourself and how you've got to where we are today.
Hey there, Craig. Thank you so much. Yes, so I am Territory Director here at PADI EMEA, as you say. I've actually worked for PADI for 15 years now. I've been here a little while, but I started diving back when I was 16 years old, got into diving. Started in the UK, down off Swanage Pier to begin with, and instantly got into diving. It was my passion. I was a PADI open water diver to begin with. I travelled a lot when I was younger, spent some time in Africa, dived in the UK, worked my way up through the ranks, and I went to Lancaster University, where I was heavily involved in the dive club as a PADI instructor. And I was very lucky. In 2000, in 2001, I was one of the very first Rolex scholars, in fact, European Rolex scholars, which meant that I got a chance straight after university to stay in the diving industry and travel and work all over. So I headed out to Australia, the Caribbean, worked with all manner of extraordinary instructors and divers, learned a whole raft. I got a lifetime's experience in just a year of traveling. It's very special. Then I came back. I ran some dive centres in Australia for a while. I was a dive guide in the Pacific. Then I came back to the UK and ran a couple of dive centres, culminating in a dive centre in Bristol, very close to my hometown of Bath. Worked there, ran that dive centre for a few years. And then my second daughter was being born, and I realised that I was getting very, very busy. And by coincidence, PADI was based just around the corner from me, behind Bristol, St Peter's Station, in fact, funny enough, Temple Meads. I became a training advisor, which was basically a kind of glorified T-boy. And I've been there ever since. Training was always my passion. I love teaching. I love being involved in diving safety, different training techniques. And I've been very lucky. Over the 15 years, I have worked in the training department. I ran the training department. I ran the quality management department. I ran the instructor development department. So I got to see and work with just these incredible PADI professionals all over the world. Act as an instructor examiner. I teach at the course director training course regularly, internationally now, at the very top of the PADI system. And yeah, I find myself in this situation as a territory director where I look after a multitude of countries, and I'm ultimately responsible for the dive industries in each of those. One of them, the one closest to my heart, being the UK. I'm a UK diver through and through. I dive regularly here on the south coast, Dorset. Portland is my spiritual diving home. And I absolutely love it all.
Yeah, we love the UK as well. The UK diving is very underrated, I think.
Absolutely, and people are often surprised when, as we all do as PADI instructors, I get asked, what's your favourite diving place? For me, actually, the very north of the UK, up in Scotland, when I was at university, we'd go up to Oban, and I still vividly recall my first dive on the Hispania up on the Sound of Mull, and it absolutely blew my mind. And if I had one dive left, that's where I would go.
My friend Mark Vasco, he's a GP up in Oban, and he looks after the dive chamber up there.
Fantastic. Oh, amazing. And what a beautiful place, part of the world as well. It's that UK diving, see the wreck, afterwards, bite to eat, go to the pub for a beer, talk about it all afterwards. That's stunning scenery. There's nothing can beat it.
That sounds perfect.
Did you ever see the basking sharks up at Oban?
Do you know what? I never saw the basking sharks, actually. We were always tend to be there out of season, so I would usually go when it was freezing cold, to be honest with you. I've done a couple of summer trips up to the Noida area as well. Never saw basking sharks, although I did, on the other side of the world, only last year for the first time, see my first whale shark out in the Maldives, which was an astonishing experience, so absolutely love it.
I'd love to see a whale shark. Absolutely love to. It's one thing that I've not seen yet, and Craig got to see it on his open water course, or just straight after.
No way.
Actually, on my very first ocean dive, after I'd done my training on the reef, I got in the water, and in the Maldives, and underneath me was a whale shark. Never seen one since. That was 25 years ago, but I saw one on my first ever dive. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Unfortunately, I didn't actually appreciate. I thought, oh, this scuba diving looks good. Look at what you get to see. Little did I know.
Just Rich, just something I picked up on there. You were IE examiner.
That's correct.
As well.
Yes, yeah.
Why would you want to move from that position? Because you are godlike. Jason Sockett was my examiner, And I'll be forever eternally grateful to Jason, and he is my all-time hero. So why would you want to move from that position?
So, Jason's my hero as well. He's a very dear friend of mine out in the Canary Islands, of course, now working as a manager out there. Great guy. It's a real privilege to be in that role. And I'm still lucky. I still get to do the occasional instructor examination as well. You know, it is one of those things where, as we all know in the diving industry, it's not quite as glamorous as it looks all the time. Trust me, if anyone's ever done an instructor examination in February in Stoneycove with 20 candidates, that's more like hard work out there as well. But you're absolutely right. It's like everything in the diving industry. Whether you're teaching a discover scuba diver in a swimming pool for the first time, or having the privilege of shaking someone's hand when they become an instructor at the end of that process, it's just such an honor to be part of it, and every single thing's magical about it. It's what makes this industry so special.
Absolutely, yeah. And Jason, like you say, is such a top guy, isn't he? He made me feel at ease, completely at ease, and all my nerves went away. He's just got a great manner about him.
Really has, absolutely, totally agree.
So talking about the industry, Jim, Rich, I know that you're a busy man. Let's get into what effect this strange time is having. Jim, you got a first question to hit Rich with regarding the industry.
Really, Rich. It's obviously that we're all in lockdown. There's a virus around, and it's a two-part question. Really, is what effect has this had on PADI, and what effect do you think it's had on the diving industry as a whole?
I think those things are intricately linked, of course, as well. Those two things. You're absolutely right. So how's it affected PADI? It's, I think, much like every business in the world, really. The effects are multiple. So there's some really practical human impacts. I'm talking to you from my flat at the moment. Every single PADI employee is working from home instead of in the office in Bristol. So we are physically disconnected. So there are implications like that. On a more practical level, of course, it's caused people to stop training to dive at the moment. PADI's a training organisation. That's what we do, is facilitate people to go training and learn to dive. And every single person out there who's listening to this, when you did that PADI open water diver course, that certification card that you got, that book that you got, came from PADI. So that's not happening at the moment. So all of that has dried up. All of those elements have stopped. So from a very practical business point of view, that's got some big consequences. Now, equally, it's something that, and I think we'll talk about a little bit later on, changed our focus, because there's so much more to PADI than just the books and the manuals and those sorts of things. So it's really meant that a big chunk of what we do, which is assisting professionals, because of course PADI doesn't do the teaching, it's the dive instructors and the dive centres who do it. We've changed our focus to really make sure the business support and things we're doing for them is taken care of. And it's helped us focus a lot on the marketing of those PADI courses and the scuba industry as a whole as well. We have a mission to teach the world to dive. That's what PADI does. And we're all about, even now, 27 million PADI certifications issued. That's a fraction of the world's population. There's so much more to go. So we're still using this time to try and reach out. They're suffering. There's no question as well. We owe it to them to try and help them as much as we can. So a lot of those businesses are becoming very innovative. And I think that's the interesting thing with these disruptive events. The diving industry and those divers are becoming very innovative with the way they're communicating. So if you're a member of the public listening, really engage with that, and let's try and help those dive centres at the moment as well.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the dive centres need a lot of help at the moment. Otherwise, we're not really going to have a dive industry, are we, at the moment? Like I say, because it's travel based and that recreational travel, well, that isn't happening at all, is it? And we don't know for how long.
That's it. I think it's going to be a really interesting flip side to this. And I think whenever there's a disruptive event, it changes businesses and it changes consumers and the way they do things. So I do not have a crystal ball, but my expectation is that as someone who's responsible for the UK, as I fundamentally am, the flights will not pick up. People are not going to be going to the Maldives and Egypt particularly soon, but we will be able to travel within the UK soon. And we all touched on it at the start of this conversation. We all know just how incredible the diving in Cornwall and Scotland, East Anglia, all those different places can be. And actually, there is yet a positive to this, because when people come out of lockdown in the UK, they can't go on holiday. but they're going to want to get away from home and they're going to want to do things. So our mission as PADI, and by extension those dive centres, and then by extension the diving community, is to really flag just how sensational the diving is. Just because you can't get on the next flight to the Maldives doesn't mean you can't have some mind-blowing diving right here in the UK. Get that going, get the staycation concept, you know, embedded, facilitate people doing that, show them just what they're missing, what they have missed. Actually, there's a real positive boon for the UK diving industry, because they see those divers coming through, they see those new divers coming through. And actually there's a real bonus for those divers, because these are the people who perhaps until now have said, oh, I'm a fair weather diver, I don't dive in the cold water. And now they find out just how amazing the UK is. All three of us on this call, we know how life-changing diving can be. So I'm excited for those people who are going to find out what's waiting for them. So
is that going to be your focus then for the next foreseeable future from PADI, from your point of view at PADI? I know PADI is global, isn't it? So, but this area that you look after, you're going to be focusing on
very much so. So, and in fact, all those domestic markets, because that same thing is replicated in, if you imagine, we think of Europe, Northern Europe, as being a domestic market where there's a lot of divers who train, a lot of them travel out. Now's our chance to encourage those people to dive locally, because they will have no option to travel out at this point in time. So we want them to engage in that. So we're already running a whole sequence of social media opportunities and adverts and information to show divers what's here in the UK. We've got some beautiful UK diving footage that we're putting out there, and we're working on ways to help the dive centres do that as well. It's a fine balance, because once those flights come back, we want to start moving those people to help the dive centres in the Maldives as well, and perpetuate and build back to where we were. What is really positive is we have, I say positive, you know what I mean, we have experience of this. So I was working at PADI a few years ago when the terrible events in Sharm el-Sheikh took place and the plane was bombed coming out of there. And I was part of the team who worked very closely with the diving industry there, who were effectively totally isolated. Yeah. And how do you help those people when their businesses are just suddenly, through no fault of their own, completely starved of customers? And we worked really hard. We learned a lot of lessons from that. We're applying those lessons now to help those dive centres and to bring them back again. And we saw over the last few years, hard to imagine as it was back when that plane went down, that diving industry has recovered and has improved. It's got knocked down again now. Now this has come around again. But that's what we do. We go through crises. We take those things head on. I said to some PADI members the other day, we're in a storm at the moment, and there's more rain coming yet. Yeah. But there's light on the horizon as well. The only way to get through a storm is to hang tight, stay focused, stay clear in what you're doing, and make sure when we look back on this time, do we remember it as a time when we despaired and we did nothing, or we were proactive and we looked at what can we do? Be that me as a territory director, right the way through to perhaps one of the listeners to this who's an open water diver who can just tell a friend about how good diving is. We've all got a part to play.
So you touched on a couple of things there, which in things that PADI are doing to help, and that was my next question. What are you doing specifically to help dive centres and instructors, DMs and pros that perhaps are sitting there thinking, well, I've paid my memberships, I've paid my dues, you know, I can't go to work.
Oh, contentious already, eh?
No, I think that's a great question, and it's really important to address that as well, because there are a lot of things doing, and I'm hoping the PADI pros are seeing this now. So, in no particular order, there is some very practical use of staff time. We've got a fantastically talented group of people who work at PADI, and they are still working at PADI, and they're still there. They're at their homes, but they're still doing things. So I hope the PADI pros have seen the huge array of business support seminars we've been running, and they're really diverse. They include everything from how to organize your dive center and do pricing of courses and make sure that they are business savvy, through to focused ones on how to use Facebook and Instagram. We've got some dedicated work that I was doing on how to improve your websites. So lots of very business focused things for those dive centers. We also work very closely in generating another range of webinars with things like our colleagues working with Eve, which is one of the support systems that PADI uses. We also look at a whole bunch of ways to help people teach remotely. And that's what's really interesting about these kind of scenarios. Again, if your listeners would have seen yoga classes being run online and all kinds of that kind of good stuff, actually the dive centers and diving instructors who are listening, they can do very similar things as well. So we facilitated a whole bunch of online training whereby people can use systems like Zoom, or the communication techniques that we're using now to run the theory elements of courses. We've created mechanisms for people to run some of the dry courses, equipment specialty, enriched air, whole courses which people can do remotely because they don't need to get into the water. So we spend a lot of time and effort building those things. As I said right at the start as well, PADI is a training organisation, and at our heart are those educational materials that PADI produces. So we've made sure that we've got 2 types of PADI materials available, and the pros will be very familiar with this. There are digital manuals that you can buy, so those pros buy them from us and then they provide them to their students, and we've got a special pricing on those to make those as economically viable as possible for the professionals. We also have a process called e-learning, when consumers can buy a product from PADI and we give the money to the dive centre. And what we've actually done is we've discounted those so that the consumer is saving money, but we've not discounted anything that we're giving to the dive centre, so the dive centres can make money as well. And that's really important, because in the climate that we're in now, it's very tempting for businesses of all sizes and shapes to go, oh my goodness, throw free stuff at people and we'll just do stuff for free to try and make things happen. The real challenge with that is that, again, the people who are listening to this from a business point of view, those small businesses, they need cash flow. They need money to keep them alive. If that money's not coming through their tills, it doesn't matter how much free stuff they've got, they still won't be able to pay the electricity bill at the end of the month. I had a fascinating conversation with a guy who I go to the gym with very regularly. I used to go to the gym with very regularly. He's a PT. And he was saying, I was talking about Joe Wicks. We all know good old Joe Wicks. Lovely, lovely chap doing his thing every morning. What a superstar, lovely man. But I'll tell you what, if you're a PT who's trying to charge £10 a go for your thing, and you're doing that because this is your time and your money, and this is how you're putting food on the table, this is how you're paying for the months and years of training that you've done, that actually is doing a disservice to a lot of those people. And I would encourage people who are listening to this, regardless of whether it's diving or anything else, if you see a professional out there offering their services, asking a small fee in return for their services, do consider taking them up on that, whatever that industry might be, because those people, that £10 for an online class, actually, that's paying for that person's food and water whilst they cannot work anywhere else.
Yeah, Jim and I completely agree with that, Rich.
Aren't always the best for them. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting kind of point. So back to your original question, Craig. So if you're a PADI pro listening, going, okay, well, what's going on for me? PADI's doing all those things. That's what your membership fees are paying for. They're paying for those PADI staff members of putting those things together. But it's also paying for that big marketing focus as well. We're incredibly fortunate, PADI. We have a big, very accomplished marketing department with huge reach. And we are putting those messages out to not only the diving community, but the non-diving community as well. Some of you may have seen, for example, a recent article in the Guardian newspaper, which included one of the top 10 things to do in lockdown is learn to scuba dive online. We have similar things with the Sun newspaper. We have similar things with the Daily Mail going in as well. We are putting a lot of those things out there because lots of people are bored. They're stuck at home. No one wants to hear about coronavirus anymore. I finally said the C word. It's terrible. Actually, people are desperate to get out of this. And by pushing that messaging to them, when this lockdown comes down, people will come out of their houses and their flats, blinking into the sunlight, and they will go, now is the time for me to do all those things I wish I had done and I've been putting off. And scuba diving is right up there for people. And PADI's marketing power is driving that message to make sure that when this lockdown finishes, which it will, and when we are back diving, which we will be, there is a bubble of people champing at the bit to get into the local dive centre and get diving.
I just want to pick up on something you said there, Rich, that obviously you are offering a discount at 25% on courses, which is absolutely brilliant, getting people through the door. Did you say you're also discounting or helping the dive centres as well? Because one of the questions we had from someone you know, I think, Carl Elliott at Scuba Lever Diving, you were his examiner, as we he said that obviously that's great having the discount, but maybe his costs haven't changed. He's still got to run his dive centre. But if you're offering a discount to those guys as well, then it's great all round, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think there's two parts to this. You're absolutely right. So if a dive centre wants to buy a physical product or a digital product from PADI directly, they get a discount on that. And we've got some special pricing around for them to help them get that, so they can make course, more profitable. Equally, as I say, if a member of the public goes to PADI.com, if someone's listening out, they go to PADI.com, choose a course and buy a course on there, when they pay that money, they will get 25% off. However, the money they are spending, actually, the vast majority of that goes directly to the dive centre, and we've not discounted anything from the dive centre. So PADI's kind of taken the hit, and the dive centre, and what's really good about this for a dive centre is they don't buy anything up front. They don't buy the book. There's no investment. Their customers buy directly from PADI. The dive centre gets the money. Customers still saves 25% on their costs as they go, and the dive centre is making direct money. And that's that cash flow, which is really important. And again, if you're a diver listening to this, that is your dive centre being able to pay their staff, being able to keep their lights on, pay their rent. That's what's really, really important to people.
Well, that's brilliant. The dive centres are obviously aware of this. I don't have a dive centre, so I don't know, but I guess they're all quite aware of that.
They are, and we put a lot of things out. We've run some business webinars really going into some kind of technical detail on how all that works and how they can do those things. And there are some people around the country and indeed internationally doing some amazing things. I was actually watching, because of course all this started in Italy from a European point of view, and some of the Italian dive centres who have been locked down for far longer than we have are running Project Aware courses, enriched air diver courses, equipment specialties, sometimes for dozens of people at a time. And it's genuinely inspiring to see that happen.
Yeah, we touched on it on the last episode actually, that there are a lot of courses out there that you don't have to be a diver to be able to do, like Project Aware and shark conservation, coral reef conservation, a life skill of the EFR. Absolutely. There's so many just to get that money through and generated. And the other part, Craig mentioned the fees word. So I know there's, I would like to give my opinion on the fees. There's quite a lot of negativity around about fees and what are PADI doing and et cetera, et cetera. I was going to try and leave it till the end really. But Craig's brought it up. Obviously, if you offered my fees back to me, I'd gladly take them. But I kind of see it as I know every area is different, but certainly in the UK and for me here in East Anglia, I don't have a lot of choices and a lot of places I can go to teach. And our local dive centre, if they weren't there, I actually wouldn't be able to teach. So although as an individual I have paid my fees, if I don't have a dive centre, of course I can't teach anyway, can I? So my opinion would be that I would like to see what PADI are doing to help those, like you've just explained, the dive centres, and getting them back up to a level where they're comfortable and making money and making a profit, because then I'm still able to teach. If I can't teach, if they're not there,
I think that's very fair. I mean, the dive centres are always going to be the cornerstone of the diving industry, and I say that both as someone who's owned a dive centre and been an independent instructor and a dive master back in the day, working for dive centres. I've done all of those things, so I totally agree with you, and that is why, again, for the public who are listening, it's really important to support your local dive centre and find ways to do that, because you're quite right. Without those local dive centres, it's very hard to then facilitate people's diving in the future.
To be honest, I mean, they do such great work, and you know our local dive centre and what they put into it. I don't have to go out and find customers. I don't have to provide my own insurance. I don't have to do risk assessments. I don't have to do method statements. I don't have to do emergency action plans. I don't have to provide equipment. There's 1,001 things that they do for us, and not to dumb down what we do, but I do essentially just turn up and teach.
I think you make a very fair point, and there's no question that this situation came along very fast, caught everyone. No matter how much we thought we knew was coming, none of us could anticipate this. So when I look at the kind of strategies that I want the PADI staff here in the UK to deploy, you're absolutely right. The first wave of that has been about getting those dive centres, securing them, making sure we're taking good care of them, looking after them. I think that there is justifiably a need for us to make sure we're looking after things for independent members as well, individual members as well. And so as part of that, we have also started, within the boundaries of what can be achieved in the current circumstance, again, looking at some of those online lectures. For example, we ran a really good webinar a couple of weeks ago with the HSE guys. We had both Mark Renouf and Phil Crombie from the Health and Safety Executive joined us. And that was really powerful messaging that they were directing about diving safety to independent instructors. We are planning a sequence of much more general webinars and discussions and presentations around diving adventures. We've got some incredible staff who've done some amazing things at PADI. We're going to interview some of them, get them to talk about some of those things, points of interest. And fundamentally, those membership fees, they're the fuel which is enabling PADI to keep going, and by extension, the diving industry to keep going. If we table those out, then there isn't any PADI, the lights will go off, and there is no, when this all comes back to normal, there's no diving industry left. So to, you know, for the people who have paid their membership fees out there, thank you for that. Thank you for doing that, being as loyal members. You will be able to use those membership fees actively teaching in water. There are those opportunities to teach remotely in the meantime, and I hope that people can take advantage of those. And remember that what that is doing in the meantime is prepping and building the diving industry for 2-3 months time. No one knows when it's going to be, but it will be this year. We will be back. We will all be back in the water doing our thing, and the diving industry, which we love so much, will still be there for us.
And I think it's a time for everyone to come together now as well, isn't it? Within the dive community, not this dive centre, that dive centre, or this instructor, that. I think everybody just needs to come together now and just be as one and get the industry back on its feet again as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And long before this, one of the discussions we have with dive centre owners very often is that actually, you know, competition within the diving industry is not another dive centre. Competition for people within the diving industry is the bike industry and the skiing industry and those kind of things, because there are customers out there, some of whom will again be listening, who have got money to spend. They've got a bit of time, they work very hard, they very justifiably want to spend their money on something which makes them happy. Our job is to show them that the answer to that question, what was going to make me happy, is scuba diving, because we know that it's a life-changing experience in the way that nothing else can be. So we're very focused on helping dive centres really concentrate on making our sport as accessible as possible, as fun as possible, and as high quality as possible. And that's always a key to it as well, making sure that we are training people as effectively and high quality as we possibly can to make them confident divers who will come back again in the future.
I was just going to say, I think we're living in such a negative time, short term now, we all believe, at the moment, Rich. For me, it's just so nice to see such a positive message coming from PADI, and the way you speak is, you know, you're so clear that this is a short-term problem and the future's going to be great, and you know, all your efforts are going into making sure that the dive industry is as solid as it can be when we're all able to get back to diving. You mentioned about the forums and the courses. You also mentioned PADI.com. Is that the best place for everybody to go to pick up on some of the things that you've mentioned?
Yeah, fantastic question. So there is information.
That was my question. That was.
there is a lot of information on PADI.com. There is also the main focus for PADI professionals specifically is the PADI Pros blog, because we're updating it live all the time. So there is a live blog which has constantly got information being put up on it. I'll certainly share that with you chaps. I don't know if it's something we can add to the notes for people who are listening to the podcast in the future. And if anyone can't find it, they can email PADI directly and we'll direct them towards it. And that has got everything from just messaging about what's going on in the world through to travel advice, teaching advice, different techniques. We're in the process of creating a scuba quiz for dive centres to use online to do Zoom meetings with their dive centres members to get them involved. It's just got stacks of stuff. And I appreciate what you say, Craig, because you're right. This is a short-term thing. And I think one of the most important things for everyone to recognise when this is, it's so easy in this world to become despondent and anxious and just think this is it. You know, this is the most terrible thing which has ever happened. And there is no doubt that for some very poor people, you know, this has been a tragedy, and there are people who have died, and that is just beyond imagining how awful that is. But we also need to recognise that this is a point in time. This is something that we live through just the same way that, you know, our ancestors lived through the Blitz, Spanish influenza before that, and all sorts of things. We are, as a society, we are incredibly robust. And I like to believe that by our very nature as divers, we are people who have travelled. We have seen things that the rest of the world has not seen. We meet people the way that no one else can meet. We have a bond which is unique to us. And I think that cohesion and that belief is so important in maintaining our own mental health and in making sure that when we come out of this, there are going to be two groups of people. There's going to be the people who freaked out, stockpiled 10,000 rolls of toilet roll and sat in the corner crying. And there's going to be people who said, you know what? This is what it is. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to be the best person I can. And I'm going to come out stronger for it at the end. And, you know, we all want to be, and divers naturally are, in that second
Absolutely.
category.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, very well said, Rich.
Obviously, these are mainly short-term kind of implications, aren't they? And what we're doing now and how we're trying to get it back up and running. What do you see the longer-term effects? So maybe a year's time or 2 years' time. I know it's kind of pie in the sky, isn't it?
It's you're absolutely right. It's a tough question because who knows? I think there are some really interesting things to pick out, though. So as we kind of mentioned earlier, I think there will be a natural gravitation to more domestic local diving. I hope that means more people will discover, and actually in that kind of time period, local UK and domestic diving will have something of a little resurgence as a consequence. So I think that would be a real positive. I think that there are probably implications for travel much more widely, which go way beyond the diving industry. And I don't know what that looks like for airlines and the cost of travel, which was already creeping in with some question marks over, you know, the challenge of divers, we love the environment, we want to travel, really bad for the environment. What a terrible kind of challenge to balance those two things up. So I think there'll be advances in how that is looked at. I think as an industry, we will start to focus much more closely on things like dive kit hygiene. I can probably count on both hands the number of times in 25 years worth of teaching when a student has asked me about, you know, the cleanliness of a regulator.
Yeah.
That's going to change. And actually the process that we need to utilize to make sure, and dive centers may have been doing this and hopefully have been doing this all the time, but we're going to need to demonstrate that in different ways. I think there are implications, therefore, for our EFR courses and for what our future customers want to learn from us. So I think there's some evolution there as well. But I also think at its heart, some things are not going to change. People still want to explore. People still want to see the beauty of the underwater world. People still want to spend their time doing something special and unique. And that is what has driven the diving industry for more than 60 years now. That is what PADI is, that desire to explore is what PADI is built on at its heart. And that will never go away. I think if anything, people are going to say, goodness me, life's pretty short, isn't it? Haven't got time to sit around and plan that amazing trip for 10 years' time. Let's get this done now. And I think that might be quite exciting and really quite good for a lot of people.
I think that's a really valid point. And I think there's to me, there's implication as to some of the skills that we learn in open water as well. So like when you're doing your buddy check and checking each other's air and think, is there going to be something you can adapt to in the training?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm part of the international training team. This is something we started looking at really closely already. So you're absolutely right. So in some instances, there are some skills which we're very familiar with. I'll give you one as PADI professionals, the dive master kit exchange where people buddy breathe. It's the only skill left where people buddy breathe. It's really a stress test. That's a really kind of clear example of something which, you know, historically, I think it's fair to say people really didn't give a lot of thought to. Now there's some question marks over it. Is that really going to be appropriate in the current climate? So we're looking at alternatives about how we use alternate air sources or modify those skills. Quite a lot of skills are things like alternate air source use actually are not problematic because, of course, you're breathing off an alternate air source which has not been in anyone's mouth, assuming they don't breathe off it during their buddy checks. So do we need to modify those buddy checks? So there are some options around there. It's going to be a real balance, and this is an interesting longer-term focus because those skills are all there for a reason. We do them for the reason. At their heart, it's because they are improve safety. So we cannot substitute a safety drill and make something less safe by trying to avoid another risky situation. So they've got to be a bit clever with some of these things as well. However, we are looking at those, again, real basic things. Spitting in masks, probably a lot less popular these days. Again, when I started diving, and you turned up with some mask cleaner, people would look at you like you were funny. Yeah. Now I'd suggest if you're in your local swimming pool and you're spitting your masks, you're going to get some funny looks from people, and understandably so as well. So there are going to be some subtle changes like that. I think we'll see some changes to those sorts of skills as well. But I think we'll only really start to see those as we get information from doctors, information from scientists. As a world, as a population, we really get to grips with what this all looks like and what it means for the future.
And that's not specific to PADI, is it? That's every agency.
It's going to be every agency, and it's going to be every industry. You know, everything which involves proximity to other people is going to require a bit of careful thought about this. I watched a thing on the news the other day of the US Marines graduation ceremony, and they all normally all stand in ranks in a field, and now they're all sat at tables apart all over a whole baseball field because people had to modify what they do. So we're going to slowly get to grips with this. But from a PADI point of view, we have an international training team who are based across multiple offices. We're all very experienced trainers, course directors and examiners. And so we're working blow by blow, literally course by course, looking at each element. And that's already out there. So again, PADI pros who are listening, that training advice is already out there. It's already documented for people to go and have a look at some of those skills and how they've been changed and modified.
I think there are some other long-term effects that are on the positive side as well, which particularly when we see some of the reports on the change to the environment with the lack of travel and exhaust fumes and everything else. Do you see some big benefits there to divers in the long-term effects of the virus?
I think that's a really good point, Craig. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that is very, very interesting, isn't it? Now, PADI recently changed our tagline because we really changed our focus to Seek Adventure, Save the Ocean. And that was a real focus of what PADI was about. And the environment, by coincidence, in the last 12 months specifically, really has come into sharp focus for PADI as being something that we need to really look at what we can do and how we can facilitate divers to help with this.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. The ocean, I think it's more than fair to say that in the last 12 to 18 months had really crept up the public consciousness as being a source of concern environmentally with plastic concerns. So I think it was already there. Now we're going to see people having a chance to stop and reset and go, okay, what does this mean for me and for my life? How I think areas will just get a rest. We'll see whole areas of the Red Sea and the Pacific which have been dived heavily and also had snorkeled heavy and fished heavily and all those kind of things. That's not going to happen. And, Mother Nature is a pretty incredible thing and she can rebuild very quickly. Our challenge as a global community, I think, is not just to instantly relapse back to everything that we were doing before and just mess it all up again. That's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Excellent.
We were originally planned to come and see you, weren't we, Rich, at PADI HQ. This is a little bit different, but maybe we can get you on again in a few weeks once lockdown's over and things have settled down and you have a clearer understanding of what you guys are doing. We can get you back on again to chat because things change really quickly, don't they?
It would be an absolute pleasure, absolutely. And I think for all those folks who are out there hankering after diving, if there's a message that they take away from all this, I hope it's just that if they get a chance to support that local dive centre, to contact those guys and do whatever they can just to throw a bit of support their way. You can't overstate how important that will be to those dive centres. So thank you in advance to all your listeners who take an opportunity.
Mark Evans said the same thing. He said, bring a buddy, bring a non-diving buddy with you and get them to do something. That's what we need, isn't it?
Well said. Absolutely. And you know what? You're going to change that buddy his life, and that non-diver is suddenly going to find out what they've been missing for. So the beauty of the diving industry is it's win-win-win. Everybody does well out of your local dive centre. You get the pleasure of bringing your friend along, and your friend gets to have a life-changing experience. What more can you ever do for someone?
Exactly. Well, before we go, Rich, pass on our regards to Emily and dinosaur husband.
Yes, well, I was just speaking to her this morning. Bless her. Yes, she had her wedding temporarily postponed. But we're all looking forward. I've got a hat. I haven't got a lot of hair, but I have got a hat. And I'm looking forward to going along and seeing that a little bit later in the year. And so,
Thank you very much, Richard. Really appreciate you coming on and also to hear such a positive message from PADI. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, only to say, as I say, thank you. And the divers out there, stay safe, look after one another, look after your friends and family. And we look forward to seeing you all in the water very, very soon indeed.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Rich.
Excellent. That was really good, really good. And we look forward to coming and down and doing it again when we can all be together and have a beer.
Absolutely. You better believe it.
No, sod the beer. I want to dive.
We'll go down to Portland. We're down to Portland. That's
yeah, definitely.
You mentioned one of my bucket list dives that I still haven't managed to fit in yet, and that's underneath Swanwick Pier as a photographer, which is what I'm into.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's one of my friends. Do you know Martin Guess?
Oh yes. Yeah.
I mean, some of the photos he has taken under Swanwick Pier And I keep saying, I've got to get to Swanwick Pier. I've got to get to Swanwick Pier. Everyone that dives, it's incredible. Macro, wide angle.
It is. There is some cracking. Swanage Pier is beautiful. You can do a little dive off if it's not too busy. The Valentine's tanks, which are just not far from there as well, which is a whole pile of old D-Day tanks out on the seabed out there. There's some. It's beautiful. It's a lot of fun, definitely. Well, let me know when you're heading down that way. That's only an hour and a half down the road from me, so I'll check my kit.
We will definitely do that. Jim and I are going to be in the car with another friend of ours, Matt, and we're going to be heading South Coast Way as soon as we're let out to play.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff.
South Coast, East Coast, North Coast, West Coast, any coast.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Take care of yourselves. See you soon.
See you soon. Cheers.
Excellent interview there with Rich, and thank you so much for coming on and to listen to that PADI positivity. Really was great. So that's brought us towards the end of this episode. Jim, you've got something that you'd like to tell people, really exciting news about our next guest coming up on the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that I'm really excited about. It's someone that I never thought would actually come and speak to us, but he is. It's Captain Peter Hammerstedt. So he's from Sea Shepherd. He started off as a first mate on Sea Shepherd, but he's now captain of one of their vessels, the Bob Barker. And he's from things like Whale Wars, Chasing the Thunder. So I'm ecstatic about that. I can't wait to speak to him. We've already spoken to him once, haven't we? And, you know, I'm like a kid in a candy shop, really. So, yeah, I can't wait for that.
Yeah, no, that really is exciting. And it was a really interesting chat that we had with Pete, and we look forward to speaking to him again. One thing we'd like to do is for you out there listening and watching on our YouTube channel, if you've got a question for Peter regarding Whale Wars or anything else to do with Sea Shepherd, drop us a line at the info@thediveline.com or Craig or Jim at thediveline.com and put a question to us, and we may even invite you in and have a chat with Peter during the episode. The other thing we'd like to say is everything we do, it's free of charge. We put a lot of effort in. The only thing we ask of you is please, if you could, like, share and subscribe on YouTube. Jim?
Same as what he said.
Brilliant. See you on the next episode.
Bye.